So the biblical roundtables for season 3 are officially done. We've got a few things we want to talk about in these ones. In the first section here, we're going to be talking about pain and suffering and loss. How do we deal with these things as Christians, and how do we allow God to work through us even in the midst of those things? So let's jump into this. Let's listen to the roundtable experts and hear what they have to say and how this correlates with season 3 of The Chosen. Let's jump in.
In the end of this episode, so yeah.
And I love Yusuf when he's delivering the psalm to Eden, and he says, "But that's not the whole psalm, is it?" Because at one point, Eden's mother says, "Let's give her something uplifting," and he says, "I'm not sure that would be honest." And I think that's an important part of, and one of the things that I think the Jewish faith and tradition has given to the rest of us is pain, suffering, longing. Yeah. It's something that we might not be able to quite as identify with quite as much as the Jewish people because of their history, but sometimes maybe we miss out on the desperation that we need to sometimes put us on our knees and cause us to surrender. And maybe that was, what, in our case, how we were portraying it is that Simon was getting to that place of desperation.
Yeah, I think this is a really huge point that Dallas is making here. I realized this recently because I ran into a group of people that I had never experienced before. It was a group of people that I feel like were so sheltered, so like kind of Christianized, that they've never experienced pain and suffering and loss in the way that normal humans would. And it was so weird for me to experience it because in some ways, like they were quicker to kind of run to God, but then in other ways, there was like a lack of depth there that I really was not expecting to see. And so like as I encountered this group, like it changed the way that I thought about things and changed the way that I thought about my suffering in my life. Like if I didn't have the suffering that I had as a child with everything with my dad died when I was very young. He was heavily involved in drugs and partying and living his own selfish lifestyle. I've had a lot of different issues in my life that kind of formed me into the person that I am. And so without those things, would I have less faith in God or understanding of God's goodness? I think that's true. And so I love what Dallas is saying here as well, where the pain and the suffering, it plays a role. And maybe us as Americans, we even have it in a different capacity than the rest of the world or different parts of the world, or especially the Jewish faith, especially during the time of Jesus, right, where they were persecuted and under attack all the time. Maybe it would have been a different type of relationship there. But yeah. Really, really interesting.
Because he needed to get to that place of desperation, and Jesus allowed that on purpose. That's something that we sometimes forget. We think we've accepted the Messiah. We're now in community with him, and now things will go great. And sometimes we need that desperation.
And the desperation, I don't know if I'm getting ahead of the conversation here, but you need to be able to acknowledge the difficult times and grieve them and acknowledge the times when God seems far away.
Right.
And it seems like part of the problem that both Eden and Peter have is they hold it in because almost with a sense that they've been so blessed in other ways and they don't want to make it about Jesus, but they haven't grieved. It's finally when Eden turns to Zebedee and his wife come and say, "You have to grieve this," right. And the Psalms there's so many Psalms that draw people into the real experience of grief and looking at what's going on, but then turning it back into a way to connect with God.
Reminds me of the Book of Lamentations, where Jeremiah is seeing all the sufferings of Israel, and he says, "Therefore this I recall to mind, and therefore I have hope. Steadfast love of the Lord never ceases, his mercies never come to an end. Great is your faithfulness." So this idea of remembering both what God has done for you in the past, what he's done for God's people in the past, but also remembering the nature and the character and the attributes of God, just who he is. And when you remember that, it gives you hope because he doesn't change. He's the same yesterday, today, and forever.
Yeah, and there's also a key scene that I think is important for us watching today, 2,000 years later, where Jesus isn't here in human form anymore, where Eden says to Mary and Salome, the rabbi I want to talk to isn't here. And Mary Magdalene says, well, yes, but it's the words that can heal you. And it's not always necessarily, those words are true regardless of who delivers them. So go to synagogue, go and hear from the rabbi. And I'm sure my Jewish and Catholic brothers were excited to see, go to a priest, go talk to someone.
Yeah, but I also think there's a sense in which you see this here, you see this in the Gospels in a sense where the disciples are struggling in the waters as, and Jesus is up praying, right? But I think there's a sense in which, he allows us to struggle because it's the struggle that strengthens us.
Yeah, I don't know if they actually bring this up in this section, but this reminded me exactly of this verse from James. Hey, if you're enjoying this video so far, I wanted to let you know that not even half of the people that watch our channel are actually subscribed. So we could be closer to 60 or even 100,000 subscribers if you would just help me and press that button. My goal right now is actually to pass Rabbi Jason Sobel in subscribers. So if you want to help me do that, make sure you subscribe, and that would be amazing. Anyway, thanks. Let's continue on with the video. If you look at James chapter 1, he says, "Count it all joy, my brothers, when you meet trials of various kinds, for you know that the testing of your faith produces steadfastness." So there is a benefit to experiencing these trials. There is a benefit to experiencing these struggles, right? And it brings you to a place of steadfastness within your faith, so that it's not the suffering that we're celebrating. It's not the suffering that we're worshiping, but it's the benefit through the suffering that God allows us to have. And so we have to take that into account whenever we're going through these trials, right? Count it joy, not because of the suffering, but count it joy because of the steadfastness, because of the growth that God is bringing you through all of it, right? I love that for sure.
Right. Our struggles are meant to give us strength.
Right.
And without the struggles, we'll never be strong enough to face the challenges in life. And God wants us to have an overcoming, persevering type of faith. And it's not because he's not there or doesn't care, but he knows that we need it to grow into the fullness of maturity.
Well, and that's in the New Testament, talking about trials and talking about that it produces perseverance and strength. And who wrote, who covered some of that?
Peter
Peter's
in his epistle, yeah.
Yeah, and that's where when skipping ahead to near the end of the episode, when Peter's on the waves and Jesus says, "Why do you think I allow trials?" And he says, "I don't know." And Jesus tells him, and that what Jesus says shows up in Peter's book later. That was a little Easter egg for fans of Peter's epistles. Was that he's learning. And maybe this came from Jesus on the waters.
Yeah, and we're seeing a lot of this throughout The Chosen, right? Where they're using specific gospel writers to learn specific things that they're going to later write in their gospels. Really, really cool way of storytelling. Absolutely.
Yeah, First Peter is all about suffering. I mean, that whole first epistle of his. And the end of chapter 2 of First Peter, he's reflecting on Jesus' own suffering. So he recognizes that suffering is not something Jesus makes all of us do.
Right.
And didn't do any of it himself. No, he recognizes that the lessons about sufferings are lessons that Jesus himself experienced. So, yeah.
And they have a redemptive aspect to them. And I think that's kind of when we go through sufferings as a believer versus sufferings when you don't have faith, there is a redemptive, redeeming aspect to it, which is oftentimes missing if you don't have that understanding of the power of suffering and redemption.
You know, early on in this episode, when Jesus is still talking with all the crowds, he says the line, "Trouble has found us."
Our last scenes with the old Philip.
And I like that middle of the road position, right? believers aren't supposed to be running around causing trouble, but we're not supposed to be running around avoiding every hardship either. Sometimes trouble has found us, and what are we going to do with it?
Yeah.
And what you just said, both of what you said it's hitting me, and I feel so bad for people today that don't have faith, because then you have suffering that's meaningless, and vanity of vanities, everything is vanity.
He's going back to Solomon's writings in Ecclesiastes, right? But like we're seeing it here too, right? Like imagine this verse without faith, right? Imagine this verse without having that safety net of God holding you up. Count it all joy, my brothers, when you meet trials of various kinds. But how can you count it joy when you're meeting these trials if you don't have the faith, when faith produces steadfastness, right? If you don't have the good part at the end of this, then it's just the trial. It's just the suffering. And it's horrible. Like you have to go through all that stuff without any of the upside at all. So how do you navigate that? And that's why the priest here is saying like he feels sad for those people, and I do too. Like I don't know how I could possibly live my life, have conversations with my wife, stay married, do the things that I do, like have relationships with the people that I have relationships. Like I don't know how I could do anything without God's grace and knowing that he is working through it, right? Man, that would be really, really, really difficult. Really, really difficult. Impossible, I would say.
It's just one darn thing after another. And that's a hard way to live.
Yeah, very much.
Pain is hard. I know a lot of you right now are going through a lot of different things. You guys are struggling in relationships, you're struggling financially, you're struggling with your health, you're struggling with things that are changing in your life, you're struggling with losing family members. There's a lot of different things in your life. I hear about it all the time because you guys tell me in the comments that you guys are going through things, right? This is a very common thing. Everybody's going through things. But I want you to hold on to that faith, right? I want you to hold on to what God is doing in your life. Know that he loves you, number one, that he is good, and that he wants the best for you. If you can hold on to those three things and understand those three things in context of the suffering, then it helps you to walk through them. It helps you to walk through what can be the hardest moments in your life. I've had a lot of those moments, whether it be losing a family member or like me and Vanessa are having a real bad week and we're fighting a lot or whatever it is. Like we've had those moments where I feel like it's all crashing down, but I always find solace in the arms of God. I always find solace in the King of Kings who takes care of everything and knows what is best for me. So hold on to him. Count it all joy when you encounter those trials, not because of the trials, not because of the suffering, but because of the steadfastness that comes through the faith that you have gained through going through it, right? Keep that in mind. You just watched a segment from our weekly live stream that we do every Sunday night at 6:30. If you want to watch the full 3-hour live stream, you can go over to patreon.com/thesnipelife or hit that link in the description down below to sign up over there. We'd love to see you over there. There's a ton of extra content, and I'm sure you're going to love it. All right, we'll see you on the next one. Peace.